You know, I thought the whole goal was to wind down the war in Afghanistan, not to actually make things worse. But at present, it seems the situation there on the ground in Afghanistan is increasingly growing worse. This, as the United States, Louisiana deals with a Cat 4 hurricane, Ida doing significant damage 16 years after Katrina. What are the odds of that? We're going to talk about all of it. Plus, of course, this ever lingering inflation issue, thanks to what the Fed had to say to us on Friday. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish. And over the weekend, of course, we learned that 13 U.S. Marines tragically died. Hundreds of Afghanis that were trying to escape Afghanistan, they died. The U.S. went in and took out some people that they believed were connected to that suicide, multiple suicide bombings. And they went in and took out some additional people that were driving a vehicle, a van, full of explosives for more suicide bombing attacks there at the airport. So clearly the violence is escalating. I'm glad that we're taking out the terrorists. We need to take out the terrorists, but I'm just once again going to say we shouldn't be in this position, right? You know that, I know that. Frankly, Joe Biden ought to know that we should not be in this position right now. Listen, the Brits, they've kind of had it. There was a report over the weekend in the Sunday Telegraph, the Times there of London, the Sunday Times out of the UK, in which allegedly people are briefing Boris Johnson, who, by the way, used to love Biden, right? He didn't have a whole lot of love for Donald Trump, but he was quite happy that President Biden was elected and was very supportive of him until now. I mean, all our allies are turning on him now. And his team apparently had some choice words. You can read about it in the Sunday Times, including that he looked gaga, which is a derogatory term, effectively saying that, you know, the guy's kind of out of it, when he was trying to address the conflict Thursday afternoon. Remember that press conference? He had his head in his hands as he was trying to answer a question that was very important and needed to be answered, which was, do you, Mr. President, bear any responsibility for what has happened to the 13 men and women that we lost? To which, again, he put his head in his hands. He said, yes, I bear responsibility, and then went on to blame the former president, saying, you know, this was all in place because of him. I'm sorry. Wait a second. Is Donald Trump the president now? Did I miss something? Who is the president of the United States of America? Mr. Biden? Joe? That's you. That's you. So you know what? The buck does stop with you. Stop blaming people. We're sick of it. I mean, this is what politicians do over and over and over again. The narcissism, right? To always turn and blame someone else. You gotta shoulder the responsibility. By the way, don't look at your watch when you're over there. And the bodies are coming back. That was another really, really horrible thing that he did on Sunday. There's video of him. You can see it online. We have some of it on trishintel.com, trishintel.com. Make sure that you go to the website. You sign up for my newsletter there. You can get all the news on the economy. You can get news on politics, markets, etc. All there at trishintel.com, my personal official website. Do sign up for my newsletter. But anyway, he looked at his watch. I mean, come on. Do you not know that, like, there's a zillion cameras on you? This is an incredibly sensitive, horrific, horrible time, obviously for those families, obviously for our country, and you're looking at your watch. I'm sorry, like, something's wrong. Something is really, really, really wrong. And I know people want to impeach him. I'm going to say this, it's challenging, right? Legally, you know, can you see this in the Senate? Do you impeach for incompetence? That's what this is. Total, utter, sheer incompetence. What he ought to do is fire all the stupid people that told him to do this, which, by the way, happens to be a lot of stupid people in the State Department. You know, we knew Antony Blinken wasn't quite there when it came to protecting our young men and women that are fighting overseas. John McCain told us that actually back in 2014. There's C-SPAN footage of it. He warned against Antony Blinken because he didn't want him to be Deputy Secretary of State He said, look, I know elections have consequences, and it's very rare that I would actually do this, but I think the guy is that dangerous. Well, clearly he is that dangerous, and then you couple him with a president who can't seem to think for himself, and we've got a massive debacle. Look, credit where credit's due. They're doing the right thing. You got to go in. You got to root out the bad guys. They're tracking them down with drones. Good. Some sophisticated weaponry, by the way. Apparently, this is the first time they use this one particular kind of drone, which actually goes in and just shreds you up. It's, like a bunch of knives that come out in order to prevent, having an explosion and there being other casualties. Nonetheless, they did that apparently with the van, but the van had all the explosives inside. So there's a chance there could have been some other casualties. We're getting reports out of Afghanistan of a house nearby being affected, possibly a child, possibly some adults. Those are unconfirmed thus far at this moment in time as I'm recording. But, look, I commend what we're doing in terms of going in now. But gosh, guys, come on. You could have fixed this so that we didn't lose those wonderful young men and women. And you know what? One of the parents, she's understandably distraught, and she's just furious with this president. And look, your son or daughter goes into the military. That's the most precious person in the world to you. You have to hope that the president, the commander-in-chief, is making informed, thoughtful decisions and not doing it for political purpose or the ability to, give a speech. A reminder, make sure you sign up for my newsletter at trishintel.com. Do make sure that you download the entire version of this podcast on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. It's very important. They want to make it very hard, I should point out, for some of us folks that want to tell you the truth, to actually get that truth out. You saw the guy that was just taking a former New York Times reporter who was then a science reporter, and he tweeted some stuff that they did not like as it pertained to a study that came out of Israel showing that those who had natural immunity to COVID were 13 times better off than those who had gotten the vaccine. Anyway, that did not go over very well with Twitter. They actually banned him permanently. So I remind you, make sure you go to trishintel.com, sign up for my newsletter there. Meanwhile, I want to talk to you a little bit about what we're seeing on the economic front very briefly, because of course on Friday we had the big shindig, which wasn't really a big shindig, right? Because it's no longer, well, at least this year, like last year, was not in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. The Fed instead gathered virtually. And we heard from Jerome Powell, who, told us more the same, right? He's going to focus on employment. He's going to taper, meaning they're going to wind down those bond purchases that they have been making, $120 billion worth of bonds that they have been buying. They're going to do that sometime this year, so we get a few more months of that to happen, and we'll see. They haven't exactly communicated how much they're going to decrease those bond purchases, but that's one of the reasons why you have interest rates so low, right? They're kind of effectively creating this demand themselves by printing money and then going out and buying up these bonds, these 10-year treasuries. And so you get a yield of 1.3%. I don't know about you, but you know what? I'm not lending anybody money at 1.3% over 10 years' time. Gosh, I actually think inflation is going to be a real concern, especially over 10 years' time. You look at it right now, it's certainly a concern, 5.4% of an increase in consumer prices. The last read on producer prices, 7.8%, which is going to catch up, obviously, with consumer prices. Look, this is a real tax on the middle class. This is taking part of everyone's earnings, and it's going to food and to energy and to housing and all of these things, but the Fed doesn't really care. So you really do need to think long and hard about how you're positioning yourself. I know I am. One of the things that I've encouraged people to look at, real estate, of course, because that's something that would benefit in an inflationary environment. You can be in something like a REIT, which would actually give you a little bit more flexibility, liquidity, I should say, right? As opposed to actual real estate, which is not always so easy to unload. So a REIT is one example. Another thing you might want to look at are other currencies. I mean, hey, there's countries around the world that maybe have more responsible central banks. Switzerland, for example, comes to mind. So look at other currencies as well. And then the other, obvious one that you need to be looking at, and I'm going to give a plug for our sponsor here, Legacy Precious Metals, because it's gold, right? I mean, one of the best ways to hedge inflation time and time again happens to be gold. I can remember telling somebody like 2 decades ago, buy gold as an inflation hedge at $300. And then, here we are, upwards of $1,800. In fact, on Friday during trading, what you saw was that gold immediately appreciated back above $1,800. The dollar, the US dollar, went down. And now that's sort of a doubly good thing for gold investors, only because, well, one, they want that inflation hedge. Two, it costs more dollars to buy the darn gold, right? Because of the inflation. So you're getting hit in a variety of different ways, in a good way, if you're investing in gold. So I think it's worth making sure that you have a very diversified portfolio and that you have a percentage of that that's devoted to gold. You can do that. I know it's hard. So I want to recommend Legacy Precious Metals, again, a sponsor of this program, and they've got more than 4 decades helping investors figure this out. So give them a ring at 866-589-0560. The number, if you're watching this on Rumble or YouTube or Facebook, IGTV, the number's on the bottom of the screen, 866-589-0560. LegacyPMInvestments.com. LegacyPMInvestments.com is the website. You can go there and download one of their free investing guides, and I think you'll find it tremendously helpful in light of everything that's going on. I suspect, again, more inflation, but not just more inflation, a lot of other things that will be happening as well, because economically we are still heading into a challenging time. I want to get to Hurricane Ida that's happening 16 years. I mean, amazing, right? What are the odds of that? I have an economist uncle who loves statistics, and I should call him and ask him the exact number on that, the odds of that, because I guarantee you it's, the odds are there, but Katrina was like a once in a century kind of event, and now we're having an even bigger hurricane happening there in Louisiana 16 years later. It's pretty incredible stuff. But nonetheless, you get a lot of things going on in the economy that are going to put stress on our economy, and thus you have the Federal Reserve, and you have Joe Biden, and some members of the most extreme left. And by the way, I'll put some Republicans in there too, because let's just say none of these politicians have been very good about focusing on our fiscal health, right? None of them, because they all figure, well, if we can spend, you might as well spend. And so you're going to be looking at a situation where America's going back into a challenging time, possibly more lockdowns they're talking about, certainly lots of mask mandates. We've seen that already. And so if the economy starts to pull back again, there's going to be a lot of pressure to come up with, that $3.5 trillion worth of stimulus by way of social, quote unquote, social infrastructure. And that's going to have an effect again on the US dollar and on inflation. Meanwhile, you've got, the aftermath of Ida, Hurricane Ida, happening 16 years after Katrina. That's a community that's going to need a lot of support to rebuild. You're going to see a lot of Louisiana lawmakers out there wanting that. So, all in, you're looking at an environment where they're going to have reason, right, to point to and say, well, we need to do this. We need to do that. Because, we need to help Louisiana, and I'm not disputing that you are going to need to help them, and I hope this time it's done the right way, as opposed to all the waste that we saw in Katrina. I spent months on the ground 16 years ago during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and went back repeatedly. In fact, worked on a documentary about the levee system after the fact as well, because there were still questions. We'll see ultimately how it performs. But the reality is there was so much waste at the time that happened, such a tremendous amount of government waste. And you had the trailers all lined up, right, in these big parking lots. And I would talk to families on the ground, and they'd be crying, and they had no place to live. I went to multiple homeless shelters. I mean, it was a mess for months and months and months. We're talking all the way into December. I remember Santa Claus coming for the kids at one of these camps where people were living, sort of a homeless shelter camp, you know, on the outskirts of town, and people had gotten together and had, you know, a drive for some money to get the children some Christmas presents because they were all displaced from their homes. There were all these families there, and it was kind of neat. Santa rode in on the helicopter and gave all the kids some presents. It was a special moment, but that shouldn't have happened, right? Like, we should have been able to be more prepared, more organized. And so I am hopeful that we learned our lesson 16 years ago, and that any spending that happens really is put in the right places and gets to the actual people. So we'll see how this progresses over the course of the next couple of days. But you've got a lot of pressure, I think, on government right now to come up with social stimulus, etc. You saw what just happened, right? Supreme Court, you saw what happened in terms of the eviction moratorium. The Supreme Court said, hey, look, you know, we can't really do anything about this, right? Like, the law is the law. And by the way, last I checked anyway, we were not a communist nation where the government suddenly says, oh, you know what, we're taking over that property. Too bad, Mr. Landlord, Ms. Landlord. You're just going to have to suck it up and let people, you know, live like squatters on your property. I mean, that's not how it works. And I understand, you know, Trump put in an emergency order, and then that got extended, and they still want it extended. They want to extend it because of the Delta variant. But, you know, at some point, you got to think about the actual landlord. Like, the landlord still has to keep the building up. The landlord still has to cut the grass. The landlord still has his or her mortgage payments that are due. I mean, you know, you just can't say we're going to, boom, presto, make this into a socialist or communist style economy. And so that's a big problem. But the Supreme Court did the right thing. The question is, how long do we have a Supreme Court that can do the right thing? I mean, you've already heard all the chatter and all the talk about packing the court. I mean, this is pretty awful to me, and I know it's awful to you. But this is what has been talked about, and I suspect as we go into 22, it's going to come up again. As we go into 24, it's going to come up again. So it's really important, I think, if you're watching this show, if you're listening to this show, and you do not want your Supreme Court getting packed with judges that are aligned with Joe Biden's point of view, if you want to actually stick to the rules as we know them, then you need to sign a petition. You need to sign a petition. SupremeCourtCoop.com is the petition that you need to go to, because, you know, all of us patriots out there, all of us who care about law and order, all of us who care about the integrity of our court system, we need to think about this. Back in April, the president, you'll recall, launched that special commission. Remember that? He's calling it to reform the court. Come on! You're going to reform the court. I mean, this is pretty crazy stuff. But the real plan, you see, I guess, is to install 4 more judges, 4 more liberal judges, because they're so upset that the Trump administration got their share of judges. And so then you're going to have real issues. I mean, you just will. I mean, this is exactly, and I'm a student of history, and I am a student of Latin America, and I've spent a lot of time reporting on various economies down in Latin America. Actually, that was my first job, trading Latin American debt at Goldman Sachs in the Emerging Debt Markets Group. But anyway, let's be very clear. This has happened in Venezuela. This has happened in Argentina. This is exactly what they do. And I'm sorry, but I'm not ready to become a banana republic. I know you're not either. So you should look at this. First Liberty is the group that's putting out a letter, and they want you to sign the petition. A lot of good folks in there, including my friends at Americans for Prosperity, as well as you've got Franklin Graham, Ed Meese, James Dobson, Tony Perkins, American Family Association, 60,000 others that are all part of this coalition right now. So check it out, SupremeCoop.com. Supreme Coup, COUP, little reference again there to Latin America, SupremeCoop.com. So do check that one out and sign up, because it's an important thing. The other thing you definitely need to sign up for, of course, right now is my own newsletter, TrishIntel.com. That is my website. That's where we have all of this news. That's where you can sign up for my newsletter. You can shop the store, the Trish Regan store, with lots of good Live Free or Die patriotic merchandise on there. And look, I think that we just have to sort of keep our heads about us right now. I think as as folks who believe in the integrity of this country, who believe in freedom, we need a plan, right? We gotta do something to come up with a better strategy, because you can't have people that really don't know what day it is. It's probably something the British would say right now about this president, but you cannot have people who do not know what day it is making such poorly informed decisions that affect our young men and women in uniform to such extent as this has. I mean, I look at it, it's needless, it's so frustrating. I've told you, I've cried a lot over the last couple of weeks in ways that I just haven't. I've been in the news for a long time, and I think the last time I was this deeply affected, sort of on a very raw emotional basis, was probably 9/11. And so that's also why it hurts so much to think that here we are 20 years later, right back where we started. So do make sure you go to trishintel.com, sign up for the newsletter. Let's keep talking, because we got a lot of work to do, okay? Roll up your sleeves. Send me your ideas. I can't wait to hear from you all. See you on Twitter and Facebook and all those places, of course. But again, the newsletter is critical. trishintel.com. See you there. And I'll see you tomorrow.